Karma unfolded. My son was fighting for his life after emergency surgery. When my brother texted, "Drive my son to his championship tomorrow. Don't ruin this for him," I replied, "I'm not leaving the hospital." He said, "Then you're dead to us." I blocked him. The next day, my son woke up, gripped my hand, and whispered, "Dad, Uncle was in my room while you were asleep." My daughter was fighting for her life after emergency surgery when my sister texted, "Drive my daughter to her championship tomorrow. Don't ruin this for her." I replied, "I'm not leaving the hospital." She said, "Then you're dead to us." I blocked her. The next day, my daughter woke up, gripped my hand, and whispered, "Mom, Aunt was in my room while you were asleep." The surgical waiting room at St. Clemens had 17 chairs. I counted them twice between midnight and 4 in the morning because there was nothing else to do with my hands. Robin had been in the operating room for 3 hours by then. A ruptured spleen from a bike accident on Hillrest Avenue, the street she rode every afternoon after school. The same 40 yards of pavement I had watched her navigate through the kitchen window 100 times while doing dishes. The surgeon came out at 8:32 p.m. and said the word stable, and I sat back down in chair number 9 and pressed both palms flat on my knees because if I did not hold something still, nothing would be. Before they took her into surgery, I had put her carved wooden bear on the bedside table. I made it for her from a piece of cedar when she was 5. Rough edges, palm-sized, a simple shape you could hold in one hand. She had kept it on her nightstand since the week I gave it to her, and I grabbed it on the way out of the house because I wanted her to see something from her own room when she came around. One familiar thing among all the fluorescent light and machinery. The nurse on intake let me leave it there. It sat next to the heart monitor, and that was the last thing I saw before the corridor doors closed. I am a plumber. I own a small company, 3 employees, and 1 service truck. Mostly residential work with some light commercial. Vance Plumbing. I pull around $72,000 a year, which is comfortable without being anything. I mention this now because my sister Blair used my job as an insult later, and I want you to know what it actually meant before you hear how she used it. My father, Carl, died of a heart attack 4 years before that night in chair 9. He was 61. Fast, which people kept telling me was a mercy, and maybe it was for him. For the rest of us, fast meant no transition, no handoff, no time to redistribute whatever had been held in place by his presence. My mother, Ruth, was 64, bad knees, lived alone in the house Blair and I grew up in, 40 minutes from my place. Blair was 40, worked sales at a car dealership, earned enough to maintain the appearance of someone who did not need help, which is different from actually being fine. Her daughter, Dana, 13, played travel basketball. Travel basketball costs money. Registration fees at the league level run over $1,000 a season. Equipment, sneakers every year because Dana's feet kept growing. Jerseys when the team updated their kit. A new gear bag when the zipper on the old one broke. Tournament weekends with hotels 30 minutes from wherever the away game was. Gas, meals, entry fees. Somebody had to cover it. Blair never asked me for money directly because Blair had learned early that asking directly risked a direct answer, and a direct answer might be no. She operated a different way. A few days before a big expense came due, she would send something low-key. "Dana's got a game Saturday. Can you grab her gear bag from the sporting goods place on 5th?" And I would go to the store. Then the registration invoice would be due, and I would pay it because the season was starting and someone had to, and the system had established that I was that person. Then Blair would send me a hotel confirmation link and I would click through and pay it because that is what you do when you have been doing it for so long that not doing it would take more energy than continuing. 3 years of that. Every dollar from my accounts. Blair's total contribution across all 3 seasons, nothing. No partial payment, no reimbursement request, no acknowledgement that money was involved at all. Just the text and the expectation, and me filling the gap she left every single time. I drove Ruth to her knee specialist every other Tuesday because Blair never offered, and the alternative was her taking a cab she would spend the next week complaining about. I kept driving her. I kept showing up for the Tuesday rides and the sports expenses and everything else because Carl was gone and someone had to hold the shape of what was left, and Blair was not offering. At some point I told myself lamely, I stopped going to Blair's house 2 years ago, but Mom still needs the Tuesday rides. So I keep showing up to a family that has already decided I am the help. I should have stopped. I kept choosing not to. That was the arrangement the night Robin was in surgery on a ruptured spleen, and I was sitting in chair number 9 at St. Clemens. At 9:15 p.m., while Robin was still in the recovery room and I had not eaten since the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Blair. "Drive my daughter to her championship tomorrow. Don't ruin this for her." I set the phone down on my knee and read it again. Then I typed, "I'm not leaving the hospital." Her reply came in 40 seconds. "Then you're dead to us." I looked at the text for a moment, then I blocked her. Wendy texted me around 9:30 from my office. She had heard what happened through Robin's school phone chain and wanted to know which hospital and whether I needed anything. I told her St. Clemens. No, I had everything I needed, but thank you. She replied, "I'll be there in the morning." I told her she did not have to. She did not reply to that, which meant she was coming in the morning. Ruth called around 10:30. She did not open with Robin. She started with Blair. Said she was under a lot of pressure. Said Dana had been working toward this championship all season. Said my father always believed that family shows up when it counts. She said Robin was in good hands, that the doctors were paid to handle her situation, that Blair did not have anyone else she could call on short notice. I let her finish speaking. I said goodbye. I hung up. A nurse came by sometime after 11 in Krause and offered to bring a cot from the supply room. I said no. She left a thin hospital blanket on the chair beside mine without asking, and I sat with it folded across my knees until I eventually pulled Robin's bed close enough and leaned in with one hand near the rail. The cedar bear was on the bedside table, 3 inches from her fingers. I fell asleep the way you do in hospital chairs. Not fully down, just holding position until morning, aware of every shift in the machines. If you have ever spent a night like that, watching your child breathe after surgery, cataloging every risk you ever let slide, and every helmet that stayed on the hook, then you already know what kind of rest that is. If this story is landing somewhere close to home, stay with Karma Unfolded. We tell the full story every week. Morning light came through the blinds in thin angled slats. Robin's hand found my wrist before I was fully awake, her fingers closing around it slowly, the deliberate grip of a kid who has been building up to something for a few minutes while you sleep. Her eyes were open. Her voice was thin from the breathing tube they had removed the night before, rough at the edges and careful with each word. "Mom," she said, "the bear is on the floor." I looked. The carved cedar bear was face down on the linoleum, a foot from the base of the bedside table. I picked it up and set it back. I sat down without saying anything for a moment, just looking at Robin, at the color coming back into her face, at the way she was watching me to measure how I was going to handle what she was about to say. "What happened last night?" I asked. Her eyes moved toward the door and then came back. "Aunt was in my room while you were asleep." She paused, working through the post-sedation fog. "She went through your jacket on the chair by the window. She took something and she left. She bumped the table when she walked past. I got up and checked my jacket folded on the chair. My truck keys were gone. The cash envelope in the interior pocket. $400 in 20s I had pulled from the ATM the morning of Robin's accident before everything else started was gone too. I told Robin I would be back. I walked to the parking lot. My truck had been in spot 42, second row near the concrete planter on the east side of the structure. The spot was empty. I stood there for a full minute and ran through the logic of it. I had not moved the truck since arriving with Robin in the ambulance the day before. I had not given anyone my keys. The keys were gone from my jacket, and the truck was gone from spot 42, and Robin had seen her aunt in the room at 1:47 in the morning. The math was simple, and the only question was what I was going to do about it. A hospital maintenance worker went past with a rolling supply cart, wheels squeaking on the concrete, not looking at me. I watched her go. I went back inside and stopped at the security desk in the lobby. I told the officer on duty that I had reason to believe someone had entered my daughter's room between midnight and 5 a.m. and removed property from my jacket while I was asleep beside the bed. I told him I was the patient's legal guardian, and I was formally requesting a review of the camera footage for that room during that window. He wrote my name and Robin's room number on a form and said someone from the security department would be in contact within 24 to 48 hours. I thanked him. I walked back to Robin's room. I sat down in the chair. There was a version of the next move that involved calling Blair right then, confronting her by phone, demanding an explanation. I considered it for maybe 30 seconds. Then I set it aside. A phone call would give her a chance to construct a story before anything was verified. I wanted the footage first. I wanted everything in hand before I said a word to anyone. Back in Robin's room, she was watching my face with the attention kids use when they are deciding whether the adult in the room is going to be all right. I sat down and picked up the cedar bear and turned it over once in my hand. The edges I had never smoothed all the way because Robin liked the texture. I set it back on the table. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm right here," I said. I almost called Blair from that chair. Her name was already in my contacts, my thumb already on the screen, but Robin's hand was still resting near mine on the rail, and she was watching my face, and the bear was back in its spot. So I put the phone in my pocket and asked her if she wanted the television on. Blair showed up the following morning, day 2, around 10 SAO. She walked into the corridor outside Robin's room holding my truck keys in one hand and the cash envelope in the other, and she wore the expression of someone who had rehearsed the conciliatory version of herself during the drive. "How's the little one doing?" Her voice was pitched to sound like an aunt checking in. "You came into her room at 1:47 in the morning," I said. Her face shifted, not toward guilt, more toward something recalculating. "I was going to bring everything back, Nora. I did bring it back. Dana needed a ride and your truck was right there. It was one morning, while my daughter was 3 feet away from you with staples in her abdomen," I said. Whatever composure she had rehearsed dropped out of her face. Wendy was coming up the corridor from the elevator at the far end, and a nurse was at the station 10 feet from where we stood, and Blair looked at both of them and apparently decided neither changed what she wanted to say. She said, "You fix toilets for a living, Nora? You crawl under people's houses so they can flush? And you think you get to sit here playing hero because your kid fell off a bicycle on the same street she rides every single day, and you never thought to tell her to slow down? My daughter had a championship game, a real thing, something that matters to someone's future. Your girl has a hospital bed because her mother couldn't be bothered to watch her ride. Don't talk to me about priorities." Wendy had stopped walking. She stood about 12 feet back, having caught the last 2 sentences clearly. Blair set the keys and the envelope on the corner of the nurse's station counter and walked toward the elevator without looking back. The envelope was $60 short when I checked it later. Gas, probably, and something from the concession stand at the championship. I put it in my jacket without counting it in front of the nurse, who had her eyes on her computer screen with the practiced attention of someone who has heard too many of these corridor scenes to react to one more. Wendy came into Robin's room and sat with her for 40 minutes. She had stopped at the art supply store 2 blocks from the office on her way over and brought a medium-sized sketchbook and a set of 12 colored pencils in a tin case. She had also brought a granola granola bar, which she set on the tray table for Robin without comment because she knew she had not eaten much since the day before, and hospital food at 11 years old is unconvincing. She did not say a single word about Blair. She pulled her chair close to the bed and asked Robin about the carved cedar bear on the bedside table. She asked what kind of bear it was, what bears like that preferred to eat, whether it had a name. Robin considered this seriously. She said it did not have a name, but it had clear opinions, specifically about salmon, based on a documentary about grizzly bears she had watched twice and found definitive on the matter. Wendy asked her to prove it by drawing the bear catching a fish. Robin took the sketchbook and started drawing. She drew for 30 minutes. The bear was round and had small, determined ears. The fish was too small at first, and Robin crossed it out and started over because it was not realistic for a bear that size to bother with a fish that small. She made the fish substantially larger, added an expression to the fish that conveyed alarm, and showed the finished drawing to Wendy, who studied it for a moment and said it looked like the fish had it coming. Robin laughed for the first time since surgery, a real one, and the monitor next to her registered the change in her breathing. Wendy did not make a thing of it. She asked her what the bear's next meal would be and whether salmon was a year-round preference. That was Wendy. She came to the hospital when no one else did, and she made Robin's first good moment about a bear's dietary philosophy instead of about anything that had happened in the previous 36 hours. I owe her more than she would ever let me say. That afternoon, hospital security emailed me the footage file. I watched it in the corridor outside the room. 1:47 on the timestamp. Blair entering, crossing to the chair by the window, reaching into my jacket, pulling out the keys, then the envelope, turning to leave, her shoulder catching the bedside table, the bear falling to the floor, Robin's hand moving once on the rail, Blair glancing at the bed for 1 second, not stopping, walking out. I watched the clip once, closed it, put my phone in my pocket. I almost showed it to the nurse right there in the hallway. The timestamp was visible and Blair's face was clear in the room light, but I had worked enough jobs where a homeowner wanted to argue about the diagnosis before I finished looking to understand that the moment you show your evidence before the room is ready to receive it, you lose half of what it was worth. The footage was not going anywhere, and neither was I. Robin came home on day 5. The bear went back to her nightstand, same spot it had always occupied, same slight angle it always settled into on the worn surface. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and 3 years of bank statements. Wendy came by after closing the office. She runs the books for Vance Plumbing, so she knows my account format the way I know pipe sizing, which meant she could move through the records faster than I could. We spread them across the table and went through every transaction connected to Dana's basketball. League registration, mutton $200 per year. 3 seasons paid directly by me to the league each time. Total $3,600. Equipment, sneakers twice over 3 years. 2 jersey updates when the team changed their kit. A gear bag I bought because Dana's old one had a broken zipper. $4,200 across the full period. Tournament travel, hotels for away weekends, entry fees, gas money, all sent via Venmo to Blair's account with "for Dana" in the note every single time. $6,300. Gross total $14,100. I had been saying $14,000 in my head for months. The actual figure was $100 more. Blair's column across all 3 years, nothing. Not one payment to the league, not one equipment receipt, not one Venmo to me for any portion of any cost. Then my phone buzzed. Marcus, Blair's husband. He texted me directly, which was unusual. Not the kind of thing he did without Blair's involvement. He wrote, "Blair feels terrible about everything. Can you two just talk? She has been under so much stress. Dana's season is expensive and Blair handles all of it." I read it aloud to Wendy. She set the laptop down and looked at me. She told him she pays for it. We sat with that for a moment, looking at the blank column on the bank statement where Blair's name appeared with nothing next to it across 3 consecutive years. Wendy is good at numbers in the way that comes from years of making small business books balance, which means she sees patterns that do not announce themselves. She walked through it out loud. If Marcus believed Blair was handling Dana's sports, he had a budget line for it in their household finances. Probably something like $400 a month when you averaged registration, gear, and travel over the full year. That $400 had to be going somewhere visible in their accounts because Marcus believed it was going to Dana's basketball program. He thought money was leaving their account for that purpose. He budgeted for it. He tracked it, or at least noted it. But Blair had never paid the league, the equipment stores, or any hotel. Every actual payment for Dana's sports was mine, traced to my accounts, my cards, my Venmo. So the $400 a month Marcus thought was going to Dana's season was going somewhere else entirely. Blair's car payment was $380 a month, reliable and on time for 3 years running. The numbers did not require much interpretation. Blair had been collecting her husband's sports budget while I covered the real costs, keeping the gap, and the arrangement worked as long as nobody compared notes. She was not freeloading. She was running a domestic fraud. I was the mechanism that made it invisible, and it had run for 3 uninterrupted seasons because I never stopped to look at what I was actually subsidizing. Wendy closed the laptop and looked at me across the table. "What do you want to do with this?" I told her I wanted to do it once, in a room where everyone could hear it at the same time, and I wanted everything documented before the room assembled. I filed the police report the next morning at the district station. I walked in, told them what I needed, and waited for the on-duty officer. When he came, I explained my daughter had been in post-surgical recovery in a hospital bed. I was asleep in the chair beside her, and my sister had entered the room at 1:47 a.m. and taken my vehicle keys and $400 in cash from my jacket. I showed him the security footage on my phone. He reviewed it, took my statement, wrote the report. He explained what I already expected. In family situations where the vehicle came back undamaged, criminal prosecution was unlikely to proceed. I told him I understood. I gave him the footage file and asked him to attach it to the report. He did. The report number went into my phone contacts under Blair's name. Beneath the number, I had already blocked. I drove home from the station. I sat in the driveway in my truck for a few minutes, the engine off, looking at the front of the house. The porch light I had left on, the front window with the blinds drawn, the same house I had brought Robin home to from the hospital when she was born 11 years ago. Then I went inside and checked on her. She was asleep, the bear on the nightstand, exactly where I had put it. The sketchbook Wendy had given her open on the bed beside her, to the page with the fish that had it coming. That same week, I sent Ruth a text. I would not be available for the Tuesday appointments going forward, and she should make other arrangements. She replied at length, a long message that must have taken several attempts to get right, covering Blair's stress and Dana's season and what the family needed right now. I read the full message. I put the phone down. There was nothing in it that required a response from me. I almost responded anyway. The night after Robin fell asleep and the house was quiet, I had the text thread open, the cursor blinking in the reply box. 20 years of reflex wanted me to type something softening, some version of let's see how things settle, some hedge that kept the door partly open. Then I looked at the bank statement still on the kitchen table, Blair's blank column across 3 years, and I closed the message without typing a single letter. The room was almost ready. Ruth scheduled what she called a family meeting for the following Saturday. She called Blair and me separately. She told each of us it would be good to sit down together, that these things needed to be aired, that she thought it would help. Blair drove over thinking Nora had cooled off, that the heat had passed the way it always eventually passed because I was always the one who let it. She sat on Ruth's couch with her arms loose and her body language calibrated to something between apologetic and casual. Marcus sat beside her because Ruth had called him too and said it was important that everyone be there. I arrived with my phone, a printed copy of 3 years of bank statements, and the carved cedar bear in my jacket pocket. Wendy waited in her car in the driveway. I had told her to stay there unless I sent a text. Ruth's living room, same carpet since 1998, worn at the path between the doorway and the armchair, same green lamp on the side table she had bought at a yard sale the year Blair and I were in middle school and never replaced because she did not see the point in replacing things that still worked. Same framed photograph of my father on the mantle, taken the year before he died, looking at the room the way he always did in photographs, like he was composing a polite excuse to be somewhere else. He had never been comfortable being photographed. I had always thought that was something we had in common. Blair on the couch, Marcus beside her with his hands in his lap, and the posture of someone who does not yet know exactly how bad this is going to be, but can feel the shape of it from the room temperature. Ruth in her armchair, hands folded, watching me. None of them had touched the coffee cups Ruth had set out on the table before I arrived. The cups were still full and going cold. Before I tell you what happened in that room, if you have stayed with this story this far, subscribe to Karma Unfolded. Every week, the full story. I sat down across from them. I did not speak for the first 90 seconds. I took out my phone and connected it to Ruth's television using the Chromecast I had set up for her 2 Christmases ago when she mentioned she wanted to watch streaming shows and did not know how. She had asked at the time why she needed it. I told her it was simple once she learned it. She had used it every night since for her crime dramas. I opened the security footage file. I cast it to the screen. I let it play. The room went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with politeness. Not the held breath quiet before someone begins a sentence. Something quieter than that, and heavier. The quiet of people who do not know what they are about to see, and then begin to. 1:47 on the timestamp. Blair entering the room, crossing to the chair, reaching into my jacket, her shoulder catching the bedside table, the bear falling, Robin's hand moving once on the rail, Blair glancing at the bed, not stopping, walking out. Ruth's hand went to her mouth before the clip ended. Marcus's eyes did not leave the screen when the footage finished, and the television returned to its home menu. Blair said I was going to bring it back. I set the printed bank statement on the coffee table. 3 years of transactions highlighted by category. League payments in yellow, 0 from Blair. Equipment in blue, 0 from Blair. Venmo transfers for tournament travel in green. All outgoing from my account, all tagged for Dana. Her contribution line blank for every season. Marcus picked up the paper. He read it slowly, moving down the columns, and he set it back on the table with a steadiness that took some effort to maintain. He looked at his wife. You told me you paid for this. Blair opened her mouth. Nothing came out that would have helped her. I texted Wendy one word. She came through the front door, which Ruth had left unlocked, and took the chair near the hallway entrance. She did not say anything. She was there as a witness. Everyone in the room understood that. You texted me, I said, to leave my daughter's surgery and drive your daughter to her game. When I said no, you told me I was dead to you. Then you drove to that hospital in the middle of the night and went through my jacket at 1:47 in the morning while my daughter was 3 feet away from you, fresh out of the operating room, and took my truck keys and $400 in cash. You drove my truck to a championship I paid for. Every registration fee for 3 seasons, every piece of gear, every hotel room and tank of gas for every away tournament. $14,100 total, Blair. All from my accounts, your column blank across every line on that statement. And you told Marcus furious you handled it. You let him set aside money every month for Dana's sports while you pocketed the difference because you knew I would cover the real costs without asking questions. That is theft from your husband, Blair. That is what that was. And the $400 from my jacket in a hospital room is a police matter, which is why it is on file. I turned to face Ruth directly. You called me the afternoon Robin was in surgery. You did not ask how she was. Not in the first sentence. Not in the second. You asked me to drive Dana to her game. You said the doctors were paid to handle Robin. You used my father's name to guilt me into leaving my daughter's hospital room. I have driven you to 52 appointments over 4 years. Copays, pharmacy pickups, the $4,300 in out-of-pocket costs that Blair never once offered to split. Not once. I kept driving you because you were alone and Carl was gone and somebody had to. That somebody was me. It was always me. Ruth's hands moved in her lap. She looked down at them. Back to Blair. I filed the police report Tuesday. Unauthorized use of a vehicle and theft of $400 cash. Both on record. Both with the footage attached. I am not asking you to respond to that. I am telling you it exists. Ruth opened her mouth. I am done paying for Dana's season, I said. I am done driving Mom to her appointment. I have been the one person in this family who kept showing up, so none of you ever had to decide whether you wanted to. That ends now. This is the last time I sit in this room. Blair's jaw locked. Her right hand opened and closed twice at her side, the fingers spreading and pressing in a slow rhythm she was not controlling. She leaned back in her seat, then shifted forward, then went still when she understood that neither position gave her anything. Her eyes moved to Marcus's face for a fraction of a second and found no rescue there. He was still looking at the bank statement on the coffee table. She swallowed audibly, her throat working once, and her mouth came open and held that way for 4 full seconds before anything came out. When it did, it had less force than anything else she had said in that room. You crawl under people's houses. That's what you are. And you think that gives you standing to sit here and talk to me like this? I crawl under people's houses, I said. So my daughter has a roof over hers. I took that money, every dollar of it, and paid for 3 seasons of your daughter's basketball while you told your husband you handled it yourself. You want to talk about crawling, Blair? I have been carrying this family for 4 years. You couldn't carry your own car keys without stealing mine. She tried one more thing. She shifted in her seat, something in her posture reaching backward, her voice dropping to a register that was trying to find something still reachable between us. When Dad died, she said, I sat with you in the hospital waiting room for 9 hours. I held your coffee. I didn't leave. You know that. You know that's what sisters do. I reached across the coffee table. I picked up the carved cedar bear. I put it in my jacket pocket. I stood up. You said I was dead to you? I said. Then you stole from my daughter's hospital room. Dead women don't owe you anything, Blair. I walked to the front door. I opened it. I stepped through it. I closed it behind me. Not a slam. Nothing theatrical. Just the quiet click of the latch finding the strike plate. The sound a door makes when something is finished and will not be reopened. 2 weeks after Ruth's living room, Blair wrote a $450 check to the basketball league for Dana's next season registration. She wrote it the way she had always operated, on the assumption that the arrangement would hold, that Nora would cover the real costs, that the machinery running for 3 seasons would run a 4th. The league processed the check. It bounced. Their accounts manager called Blair on a Tuesday afternoon and told her the check had come back and Dana's roster spot was suspended until payment cleared. She was not unkind about it. Just matter of fact, the tone of someone who has made this kind of call before and knows that the person on the other end does not have a good answer. Blair sat in the dealership parking lot during her lunch break and called my number. 1 ring, then voicemail. She hung up without leaving a message. She sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes. Wendy happened to drive past on her way to a parts supplier and recognized her car parked in the row near the street, the engine running, nobody going anywhere. She mentioned it to me that evening. Blair never called the league back that afternoon. The roster spot stayed suspended. Dana did not play that week. Marcus had been at his mother's house since the Saturday of the meeting. 11 days in, he texted Blair one sentence. Show me the receipts for Dana's last 3 seasons. Blair opened her banking app on her phone and scrolled back through 3 years of transactions looking for something she could forward to him. Every payment for league registration, equipment, and tournament travel traced to one source, Nora. Blair's account showed the sports budget going out each month. It did not show it arriving anywhere it was supposed to go. She closed the app. She did not text Marcus back. She sat in the kitchen of the house they shared, at the table where they usually ate dinner together, and looked at the sliding door to the backyard for a while. And that silence was the answer Marcus already had. The drive home from Ruth's house that Saturday afternoon was Blair and Dana in the car. 22 minutes of mostly nothing. Dana had sat during the meeting on the bench seat near the front door where Ruth put her keys, far enough from the living room to not hear everything but close enough to hear some of it. On the drive home, neither of them spoke for the first 8 minutes. Then Dana turned toward her mother and said, Mom, did Aunt Nora really pay for all my games? Blair's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She did not answer. Dana looked out the window at the passing streetlights. Blair reached over and turned on the radio. Dana reached over and turned it off. They drove the last 14 minutes in complete silence. And that silence was probably the thing Blair came back to alone on the couch later, because Marcus had returned to the house and taken the bedroom and locked the door, and the couch was what was left. And the question Dana had asked in the car was still sitting in the air without an answer. Ruth left me a voicemail 3 weeks after the meeting. Something about how sisters find their way through things when they give it time, how my father would have wanted us to work towards something better than this. I heard the first sentence and set the phone down. The notification sat on my screen for 3 weeks after that, unplayed, the way certain things sit when they are present but no longer have any claim on you. 6 weeks after the Saturday at Ruth's house, Robin's baseball season started. Blair was sleeping on her couch because Marcus had the bedroom. Dana had not played basketball since the roster suspension. The $450 check was still unpaid. The league had sent one follow-up notice and then nothing, which meant the spot was gone and the season was effectively over for Dana before it started. Across town at the dealership, Blair was selling cars to people she smiled at, and whatever she was thinking about on the drive home each night, she was not sharing it with anyone who mentioned it to me. I signed Robin up for baseball the Tuesday after she came home from the hospital, while she was asleep in the afternoon. I paid the $85 registration online and added her to the practice schedule. She did not know about it until I mentioned it at dinner that evening, almost in passing, something casual. She looked at me for a second to confirm I was serious, and when I confirmed it, she went back to her food and said, "Cool," in the voice kids use when something matters to them, and they do not want to make it a scene. I knew what that voice meant. I stood in her doorway that night for a moment before turning in. The cedar bear was on the nightstand. Same spot it had always sat. Same slight angle it had always settled into on the worn wood surface. Her baseball glove was on the floor next to the bed, already broken in from the afternoon she had spent working it with a ball and a rubber band before the season officially started, already carrying the smell of leather and grass and something that was just her room. Robin was asleep on her side with one arm folded under her pillow. I walked to the kitchen. Ruth's voicemail notification was on my phone, 21 days old. The badge was still on the screen. I looked at it for a second, then set the phone face down on the counter. I opened the back door and stepped outside. Warm air, still enough to hear the neighborhood, a dog somewhere on the next block, a car turning off the main road, the low sound of someone's air conditioning unit kicking on. I sat down on the back step and held my coffee in both hands. Blair had a couch and an unanswered text from Marcus, and a daughter who had stopped talking in the car. Ruth had a voicemail on a phone I was not going to pick up. The $450 check was returned. The cedar bear was on the nightstand in the bedroom. The voicemail was on the counter inside. The kitchen was quiet behind me, the way a house gets quiet when the person you built it around is safe and asleep and does not need anything from you at this exact moment. I drank my coffee. The sky was still faintly lit along the western edge. I did not check my phone.